Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Just Tamika. When last we met, we were interviewing Mr. Kong Fang, content creator and member of the Asian Pacific Islander community, and we are talking about his perspective on growing up Asian in America. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy. So maybe to someone who might be a little older, I feel like younger people are more open to mental health interventions. They might be open to things like mindfulness. They might be open to, because they've had more exposure to it.
Yeah.
But there might be someone who's listening who has an older parent or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you could share or that you could think of that traditionally is helpful for people to deal with emotional struggles or mental health struggles? I think for me, what comes to mind is, well, obviously I'm not Asian American, I'm African American, but I know like a lot of Black people have spirituality ingrained, and so prayer for a lot of African Americans is something that can become a coping skill. And I think that meditation looks different for everybody, and even across cultures, it can look a little bit different.
Yeah.
Are there things that you think are healing for the culture without having to? Because some people, just let's face it, some people will not go to a therapist. Some people will, and I get it, but there is something that they can be doing, right?
Yeah.
So what are some things other than the, drink water, exercise, get enough sleep?
Like those essential things.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you think you could highlight? And I get that you're not speaking for all people, just sharing your wisdom and your experience.
Yeah. So things that I like, just lay out the foundation, like people of color and minorities, and especially Asian American, we tolerate a lot of like things. So that in general, like if we don't get this, we'll be okay. Like if we don't go get this, we'll be okay. So like some things that you mentioned definitely falls into the books. Religion. A lot of Asian people, they lean into their religion, whether they're Christian, shamanism, Buddhism. You're making your peace offerings, and there's a spiritual transaction.
Okay.
Whatever that looks like for the families or how they do it, because one family might believe in Christian different than another family that believes in Christian, vice versa, Buddhism and shamanism and all those stuff. So religion, definitely, and peer support. You have your family. There's like, for example, in the because I'm Hmong, right?
Yes.
In the Hmong community, people make fun of the Hmong people, like we're like, man, they have like a lot of kids, like they have a lot of babies. But I don't think they realize that the Hmong ethnic group, it's a small group. It's a small ethnic group. So when we see another person, we're like, dude, your mom. Oh my gosh, your mom.
Yes.
Where are you from? What is your last name?
There's that camaraderie and that.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of us. So then you want to create options to multiply, to not just to spread your roots, but to be able to multiply and put us out there, right? That's like a whole nother conversation. But so there's peer support, religion, and definitely family, and other unique tactics that work for you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all. I think the most important thing is tolerance. Like we learn to like my dad and my uncle, for instance, they can go into like the jungle with like nothing and like survive.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? And you throw like a newborn Asian American millennial out there, or maybe like a Gen Z, they probably might die if they don't have their cell phone for goodness sake, right? So like there's a lot of things. Yeah.
So you because you're talking about the older people in your family, what is something that you would tell them? So and I get that traditionally, not just people from your culture, but men in general typically do not talk about their feelings. So I'm not imagining they'd be like, hey Kong, I'm depressed, I don't feel right.
Yeah.
But if you notice that either your dad or your uncle or someone was struggling with, how would you help them to find self-care? Like, what does self-care look like for them?
I would think well, like first and foremost, from my experience, because this is my experience with my elders, I never really grew up like having that like friendly father and son
It's
conversation.
more formal.
It was more formal because I felt like maybe my grandpa didn't do it for my father.
Okay.
So then maybe, but then he was always there whenever I needed him. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. No,
like,
no.
like
I
love.
think I get what you're saying.
Yeah, love is more like, not saying I love you, but like, have you eaten?
Yes.
Like, how was your day?
Yes.
Have a good day. That's the I love you, right?
I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
It brings to mind a conversation I had with, that was years ago. What we ended up talking about was, but it was cohorts, it was ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, if like today, we can say I love you, we spend time, we see value in those things, right? Those who came before us, they didn't have time to do that. They were busy trying to make sure they were surviving, that a supportive family. So I love you didn't look like hugs and quality time. I love you looked like, I mean, I love you like I paid for the rent, you got food, like, so it was that sort of thing. It was that act of care.
Bought you like clothes.
Yes, and
new
then
backpack and
exactly, you have the things that you need because I love you, and it was demonstrated that way. So I totally relate to that, and it takes me to Maslow's hierarchy of need. Remember the triangle? And for those who don't know, Maslow was an American psychologist who came up with a triangle pyramid, basically. And at that bottom base level, what he's saying is that people need physiological safety. So, keeping your body safe, making sure that you're okay, that you have food, water, that you take care of the basic drives before you can ascend to that next level, which is love and things that... things of loving, being loved, feeling loved, emotional safety. So if the ones who came before us were concerned with physiological safety, making sure that we had food, clothing, and shelter, they weren't able to transition yet into a place of having the freedom, really, of thinking about things like, oh, I love you, do you feel loved? Once you climb that level, there are other layers. If you're not familiar with it, please Google it. It's very simple. It makes a lot of sense. But essentially, it is that you have to get needs met before you can move up to higher needs and eventually to the place of self-actualization. But that's just kind of what it brought up for me, because I think that I think it has more to do with age, but it could also have a lot to do with I've never had to come from another country and adapt here. I would imagine if somebody picked me up now and I had to leave America and live somewhere else, in the course of adjusting, in the course of teaching my kids to be safe in a place that I don't know, I might not have as much time for the I love yous. I might be busy trying to teach them how to survive. And I think it's very significant in the African American community, because that's where my experience is, right? A lot of the people who were coming from enslavement, and it just really was not a safe place to be black. You're not teaching you're not teaching your kids the softer, finer points in life. You're teaching them to, I think, way back in Jim Crowism days, it was don't look a white person in the eye. You had to avert your gaze, because if your children stood up to them, they most likely would end up like Emmett Till, lynched and beaten and all these things, right? As they paved the way, though, their kids had the luxury to be able to ascend to that next level and demonstrate love and care for their kids. And so I think that's just like a powerful thing for all of us to remember, that our parents really they're working with the tools they got. Doesn't mean they don't love us. I think you just have to look for the evidence of it, because there are some that didn't do that, right? And so I think that's where we're getting to that place. But
there's something on my mind, and I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to say...
We're just going to go until we feel like we're done, and if this becomes a series, it becomes a series.
I have to say this. There's two thoughts, and if I don't say this, I'll forget. The first thing is, you mentioned a really good point about, if you were brought overseas and you would be too worried about other things, instead of I love you. Our families brought us here for safety. We ran from like the Southeast Asian American story, the Southeast Asian story, for instance, that is a small component of the Asian American diaspora. We are like a survival group, like lived with fear where like genocide was happening, like it was real, and like to the point where people fled their homes.
And talk about recent history. That wasn't very long ago.
That was in during the Vietnam War, which is only pretty recent. So what I'm trying to say is, and they bring us here and they have these expectations, and then we adapt to American culture, and then they're like, oh, what are you guys doing? What happened? You know what I mean? And so what I'm trying to say is, wealth is something, and wealth and prestige is something that they very the elders really value for their children, because they fought to get here, and not a lot of ethnic groups get to come here, right? And not just that, but we get reminded like, hey, you know, like, you're still sleeping when it's like 10. Like, back then I would already be up at 3 doing this and this. And not just that, but like kids that are like 5 or 6 years old, they would be like housewife like material already if they were like a daughter. Anyways, that's that. And there's this movie called The Farewell, and Nora Awkwafina plays it. It's a, you know what an indie film is? Indie films are like films that don't really, it made out to a big screen, but it was considered an indie film. So indie films are usually shown in only
it's called Farewell.
The Farewell.
Farewell.
So it's subtitles. So, but it has English components because she starts in New York and then she goes over. Her grandma from I think it was Taiwan is dying and of cancer, and her parents and their siblings, her auntie, uncles, they all go and see her every year to lie to her that she's actually doing well, and also there's they do a fake wedding, like one of her grandsons getting married, and it's all planned. What does it do? It helped her live a little longer, because she in her mind she knew that her kids were okay. So, but she lived a little bit longer. But if she saw the diagnosis that she was dying, obviously it probably would have killed her, right? Or it would have ruined her mental health. That's why, I don't know if that's why, but if you didn't know, there's a stereotype. Asian people don't go see doctors. Asian parents don't go see doctors because they don't want them to take their money. And not just that, money is, this is my perspective, right? Money is an issue, and also they don't want to know their lifespan.
I get that.
And there's that, and it might sound weird to people, but it's really black and white. So like, I think the only time I took my mom to see a doctor was when she had an allergic reaction, when she tried to dye her hair and her face was swollen.
Oh, it happened to my friend too.
Yeah, so then I was like, we gotta go urgent care, because like, you have no choice. I will carry you, you know what I mean? You have Medi-Cal, like, we gotta go. You know what I'm talking about? And they don't understand that.
I'm sure that was scary for her, though.
Very, very scary. And she's like, oh, I've done this before, I'll be okay, which I'm sure she probably had, because I heard stories, but it was when I saw it, I knew I had to respond. Me and my siblings. And so what I'm trying to say is, if they are afraid to go get this, what makes you think they'll go get mental health?
Right.
And I'm not saying like, don't go get mental health. Please do if you need help. But what I'm saying is what's already like happening, right? And obviously not a lot of things can change, but the people that can change it are the people that are the next generation,
right,
that will seek help, right? Because there's people that are coming out in the Asian American community that are LGBTQ, and that's like big, like taboo, right? And that's something that it's kind of like we are trying to catch up to what's happening now, of what's the norm, right? Or of like what people are dealing with on how to do it. They don't put their kids in sports because they don't want to have them come home with broken arms and stuff like that. So I hope that kind of clears up. I hope that's an insight that kind of clears up some of that fog of why, you know, the Asian community might not want to
better understand the community. I find it helpful, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Hey friends, it's me, Just Tamika. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First off, it's free. Did I say that? Yes, you heard it. It's free. And there are many creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. So there's no need to rush out and buy any unnecessary equipment. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many others. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Yes, you heard me. No minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. So go ahead and download the Anchor app today. Go to anchor.fm to get started. And can't wait to hear your first podcast. So the question that I have is, let me give you a little context first. So for people who are listening and may not know, assimilation is when you shed everything that's your identity and you blend for the sake of blending into a culture. Acculturation is where you retain some of your culture and just kind of fit in where you can. So I know that a lot of minority groups or individuals, I won't even say minority groups, individual minorities need to make that decision of assimilation versus acculturation, right? And I think that sometimes in the thinking that, assimilation is best, you shed so much of, you give away so much of who you are versus acculturation where you're trying to maintain.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, what have you noticed in the struggle to find that balance? Because I can't imagine anybody going, I'm going to assimilate and give up everything and just intentionally, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But maybe there are those who think that, okay, I just need to become American, not realizing that there is no what is American, like this, you know what I mean? So what are your thoughts on that, like just the balancing act of acculturation versus assimilation?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Tamika. I feel like I'm still in that journey, if you want me to be honest. Like, there were times where I felt like I didn't want to be known as Asian, because and to this day I feel like that's a wrong way to think about it, but some people might feel that way, and I want to acknowledge that, is because there's times where I just was looked at as like an alien,
just tired of being different.
Just tired of being different, and not just that, but to answer your question, I think it's important to find balance. The reason why is because your culture is a very big and important part of who you are, and if you don't keep certain elements of it, it's gonna get lost, right? And not just that, but unfortunately we live here in this country where if you don't adapt, it might not be able to employ you in certain careers, right? I'm sure that kind of speaks for itself, but if you look apart, you might not qualify. I'm quoting my fingers right now. Right. You might not qualify or fit the profile for certain, like industries, right?
Let's even talk about calling somewhere to see if they're hiring or about an interview. And if you have a traditional or an ethnic name, feeling like, they're not going to call me back, right? Or God forbid you have an accent when you call somewhere. I mean, because it's not just on paper. You know, it used to be like, okay, as I know there are people who, I will say I'm somebody who, my girls do not have ethnic names. I mean, they have names of predecessors. Like, two of my girls are named after my oldest daughter is named after my grandmother, who was named for, my oldest daughter is named after my mother, who's her grandmother, who was named for her grandmother. And then my middle girl was named after my mom. And then my youngest girl is named after, you know what, we thought she was going to be the boy and she wasn't, so she has a variation of my husband's name.
Kind of like a unisex name.
Yes. Now, his other children have more ethnic names.
Okay.
I don't know if I should say their names or not, but you know, and it just kind of felt like you're stacking the deck a little bit. So for me, there was a struggle of maintaining who I am in the culture. You know, there's unapologetically black, right? There's that drive to do that and to be who I am and all that I am, but then this very real sense of I still have to exist in this world, and so do my children. And I want to, as a mom, you want to give your kids the best shot that they can have. You want to reduce or eliminate barriers wherever you can.
Exactly.
And I think along with that, just going back to a comment I made earlier, where our parents really didn't feel like they had they were so worried about safety and concern. I think there's still elements of that run through, and I think for parents especially, and I feel like you understand this as someone who's about to be a parent himself. There's that need to protect, to want to give your child everything that they need to be okay in this world. And I think for many minorities, I know for sure, I've heard about it in my culture, but having the talk with your kids. And when I say the talk, I don't mean the birds and the bees. I mean the reality of being safe as a minority in this world, how you need to act around police, how you need to be aware, how you need to, you know, these are real things. But if we don't talk about our kid, talk to these things about our kids, how are we keeping them safe? And so for me as a mother, it very much comes up where it's like, okay, part of that conversation of blending in and, you know, and giving your kids traditional versus more or non-ethnic names. I think for me, that definitely falls into the category of safety and trying to keep our kids, you know, safe and just helping them to I think the goal is, and I really it resonated with me when you were talking about how some of the older people in your generation, the elders, would you wanted to make sure that your child had success, and because then you're okay. If I die tomorrow, I know my kids are okay. If they have an education, if they have
over their head, food on
yes,
table.
exactly. I know that they'll be okay. Then I can rest in peace. I don't know that if I was struggling and my kids, I didn't know if they were going to be okay. You know what I mean? There are times as a mom I felt like, well, shoot, I can't even die because there's so much that Like, I mean, you know, if it was a choice, like, not that I'm suicidal, let me put that out there, but you know, it just felt like I didn't even have the luxury of dying because there was so much that needed to be done, so much that I felt like my kids still needed that wasn't resolving or didn't feel like it was being resolved, and it was just a frustrating time. But I want to thank you, Kong, so much for just sharing your heart and your spirit today. And I would like to allow you to leave any last words with anybody who might be listening. Like, what is one thing you'd like people to kind of keep in their hearts and their minds?
The fight continues. I don't want to say, what is that term? Maybe the fight or the battle is, we're still in the battle. And I would really love to see like more milestones happening, and some to mention like Brenda Song and Disney, Sunisa Lee, who is actually Hmong, representing Team USA, winning all around in gymnastics during the Olympics recently. Jeremy Lin, the first Asian American basketball player, a point guard actually, not just some huge like center like Yao Ming. In the NBA, which is a dominated like league with other, you know, ethnic groups too. YouTubers are coming up, and I feel like I'm glad YouTube is a space that is creating voices to Hollywood.
Absolutely.
So it's good to the point where I think like YouTubers and TikTokers are even being invited to like some Oscar events, but or some of those Grammy shows and etc. So if you are a creator, if you have something to say, definitely not the right way to do it is rigid or force and, you know, direct and all that, but do it in a way where if it's words or something you create to be able to send a strong message, sometimes some of those little things make the biggest difference.
Amen. Reflecting on our conversation yesterday, I think what I'm hearing is a call to arms, right? So anybody who has a platform, if you have a voice, if you don't have a voice, find your voice. Find that thing that helps you to kind of speak your truth, speak who you are, right? And I think for you, it's very evident that it comes out of you in the way of your content, right? That's kind of your voice. That's how you speak for the people. That's how you demonstrate, you know, you actually are someone who can be a beacon to other young people, other young Asian Americans, like, oh my gosh, like I can be that guy. You're young, you're professional, you have all of these things that you create and that you do. You are doing a lot of things, and I actually want to leave space for you to share how people can access some of your content, how people can support you in that way, so that, you know, people can really begin to kind of, because I think that you are on a lot of people's radar. You just don't know it yet. But I think that this is a great opportunity for people to learn more about you, who you are individually, learn more about your culture and your background, and bring light to that, to those who aren't seen, to those who are still in the shadows. And to those people, I say, step into the light. You know, if you have a passion and you want to advocate for your people, there are so many ways to do it. You can get
Especially
active.
today.
Yes.
Today, you could get so creative and a lot of things you want to do, and it's so cool, and it's just gonna get easier. Now it's more about who's the most creative, or who's the most like original or unique.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
Innovative, right?
Innovative, yeah.
Yeah. And I think there are so many opportunities out there too. So even if content creating is not your thing, you can get involved with community movements, with associations, with organizations.
Yeah.
I say though, direct and focus your attention, your time. Don't just try to do everything because you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
Choose those things that truly speak to your spirit and that truly align with who you are, and then add your energy to it. So
yeah. So if you guys are interested, I have a YouTube channel. It's called HTK Pro, or that's the acronym, but it's called High Defined Concept.
Can you spell it
Pro.
so that they can find it?
Yes, it's HI, and then I do a dash, and then define as DEFINE, and then concept KONCEPT, and then pro, PRO as short for production. You might not find you're gonna find a lot of diverse content there, because that's the channel where I vlog and I do personal adventures. I do I have some short films on there that I've done and submitted in the past.
And you also have some short films that you've won awards for.
Yes. So I've won a few awards with some of the short films that they're on it. You're more than welcome to connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram is the Kong M, as in Matthew, V. And the reason why I call it the Kong MV, M is my middle initial and V is my last name, is because there's a lot of Kongs in my in the Hmong community. That's a common name.
Yeah.
I don't want to be just another Kong Vang. I want to be the Kong.
Okay.
So that's why I
that.
put that. So that's just some weird a little fun
Makes you
concept.
unique. I like it.
So that's that, and super excited to be here, and thank you for allowing me to help talk about this. And to be honest, I can talk about this all day, but
as you should.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that has been another episode of Just Tamika. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and hope to see you next time.